The speech that rewrote the special relationship, how King Charles won Washington with wit, precision, and quiet power. King Charles in America. The jokes, the subtext, and the diplomatic reset that caught Washington off guard. For a few minutes inside the United States Congress, something unusual happened. A British monarch stood at the center of American power, not as a relic of history, but as a voice of influence. And instead of sounding distant or ceremonial, King Charles III delivered something far more effective, a speech that was warm, witty, and quietly strategic. It landed not just in the room, but across Washington, across Europe, and across a relationship that had been drifting toward tension. The speech, what he actually said, and what he meant. The address itself was built on a familiar surface, shared history, democratic values, and the enduring special relationship. But underneath that, it carried sharper intent. Charles emphasized the importance of democratic checks and balances, continued support for alliances such as NATO, the need for global cooperation, including on climate and Ukraine. These weren't neutral themes. They were carefully chosen contrasts, subtle but clear, to divisions that had recently strained UK-US relations. The result was a speech that managed to avoid direct confrontation, signal political positioning, win applause across party lines. That balance is rare, and it was deliberate. The jokes that carried the weight. What made the speech travel beyond politics was the humor. Charles didn't just deliver policy-adjacent remarks. He disarmed the room. The speaking French moment. His most widely shared line came at a White House dinner. "If it wasn't for us, you'd be speaking French." It was a direct, playful inversion of a recent comment by Donald Trump, who had claimed Europe would be speaking German without US intervention. The room laughed, but the subtext was sharper. Britain mattered historically. Britain still matters now, and the relationship is not one-sided. The joke traveled globally within hours. The Boston Tea Party callback. Charles also joked that the evening was a considerable improvement on the Boston Tea Party, reframing one of the most famous anti-British events in American history as shared heritage rather than division. The White House real estate dig, referencing renovations to the White House, he added. Britain had already tried real estate redevelopment in 1814, when it burned the building. It was historically accurate, self-aware, and gently provocative, and that combination mattered. Macron, Trump, and the reaction that followed. The speech didn't exist in isolation. Its impact came from how others reacted. Emmanuel Macron, turning the joke into diplomacy. Emmanuel Macron responded publicly to the speaking French joke with a single line that would be chic. It was playful, but it also showed something deeper. European leaders were watching closely. They understood the symbolic messaging, and they were willing to engage in it. The speech had crossed borders. Donald Trump, praise and alignment. Trump's reaction was notably warm. He called Charles a great king. We need more people like that. Publicly praised his speech to Congress. More importantly, his administration made a concrete gesture, removing tariffs on UK whiskey during the visit, framing it as a goodwill move tied to the royal presence. That is not symbolic. That is policy. The immediate impact. Did it improve US-UK relations? Blunt answer, yes, but with limits. Short-term impact. High confidence. The visit eased visible tensions between London and Washington. The speech received bipartisan approval. Public optics of the relationship improved significantly. Diplomatically, these developments matter. Now engage without appearing divided. Trade gestures and cooperation become easier. The narrative shifts from conflict to partnership. Medium-term reality. Measured, however, core disagreements still exist. For example, Iran conflict, trade tensions. US policy direction has not fundamentally changed. The improvement is based on tone, not structural alignment. Even supportive commentary notes the effect may be temporary rather than permanent. What most people missed, the real significance of the speech was not the applause. It was the method. Charles demonstrated something modern diplomacy increasingly relies on: soft power that shapes behavior without forcing it. He avoided confrontation, but signaled boundaries, used humor to deliver historical reminders, positioned Britain as an equal partner, not a junior ally. And crucially, he influenced tone, which often precedes policy. That is influence without authority. And it worked. Why this moment matters more than it looks. At first glance, it was just a royal speech. In reality, it was a stabilization move during geopolitical tension, a reassertion of British relevance on the global stage, a reminder that influence is not only economic or military. For a brief window, a monarch, not an elected leader, became the most effective diplomatic actor in the room. That is the story. The bottom line: King Charles didn't change us policy overnight, but he changed something just as important: the direction of the relationship. He made it easier for leaders to cooperate. He made disagreement less visible. And he reminded Washington that Britain still knows how to lead quietly.